for today's panel. What we've done is we've actually given our panellists some questions beforehand, which makes it much more relaxing, and there might be a few surprises, but no big surprises along the way. And so for our first question for the day, which is, in your opinion, what industry sectors will grow the most jobs in the Pilbara over the next 10 years? And this is such an important question for the Pilbara. We know there is a massive push from government, non-government organisations, everyone for jobs and local content and local procurement. So I think this is a really important question. So I just would like to get a bit more information out of this from you. So to Chris Adams, you talk about sort of the three areas that you think are going to grow the most jobs, and what I wanted to talk to you about was the small to medium enterprise growth. We know that in the Pilbara, and in particular Karratha, small business has been underrepresented, and we know why, we know the reasons why. So what is the city doing to grow that small to medium enterprises, and how's that going to look like, do you think, in the next 10 years?
Yeah, thanks, Kitty. I guess I'll answer that by saying two questions. I remember two stories, I guess. 12 years ago, I was at a function with Alana McTinnan in Port Hedland, at the Port Hedland Port Authority. It was their annual Christmas party, and they were celebrating at the time the first port in Australia ever to do 100 million tonnes of iron ore. And there was a big song and dance about it. They beat Dampier by a year to be 100 million tonnes. They do that in 2.5 months now, that level of work. So that's the scale of growth. And while we talk about cyclical growth and booms and busts, there has never been a boom like we've just seen.
Yep.
So to get to your question, what are we doing about it? The video that we played before from the City of Karratha talks about the opportunities that are there now. The barriers to entry for small business have gone. Costs of living have come down. Costs of rent have come down. Availability of commercial space, availability of industrial space. It's all there now. So to answer the question, what are we doing? The barriers to entry for small business are gone.
And those barriers would have been the cost of land or a site or locations. Yep. So when you say the barriers have gone, explain that a bit further. They've been removed?
The cost of land, the cost of labour, the cost of housing, and also the availability of work is there. And I just want to say, 6 years ago, Gappridge Industrial Estate didn't exist.
Yep.
So Gappridge Industrial Estate, for those who aren't aware, between Dampier and Karratha, it's a large industrial estate, about the size of Canning Vale. 6 years ago, roads were being built there. It's now 20% full, but 700 people work there every day.
Yeah.
700 people go to work in that estate every day. 6 years ago, it didn't exist. There's so much opportunity in that small and medium business growth and that supply and logistics to the iron ore, oil and gas industries. It's just so exciting at the moment that there is. We had this crazy situation during the boom that small business was struggling.
Yes.
We've now got so much opportunity for small businesses, medium-sized businesses, franchisees to actually come to our district and thrive without having to go through all the pain and suffering of coming into a district which was hard to enter.
And are you seeing franchisees starting to sign up or starting to come in?
I was told that last night the success of a community is how many coffee shops it's got, and whether it's got an Indian restaurant. And we've got 2 Indian restaurants and 10 coffee shops.
Brilliant. So success ticked.
Yeah. So we're starting to get there. So yeah, we are seeing huge growth in the retail, small business, services industry, but it is that mining service industry. We have 14 gas trains in the Pilbara. The hundreds of billions of dollars that have been spent has to be operated, has to be maintained. That's where the future growth in the region is.
Exactly. And how you attract more people to be able to fill all those jobs is by having diverse and interesting small businesses. I mean, small businesses add so much dynamism to a community. Thanks so much for that, Chris. Really appreciate it. So I'd also like to just get a bit more information from you, David, from the town of Port Hedland. So you're talking about pastoral farming and launching the beef market into Asia. If you can just talk further how this is going to look, what's already happening, how you see this creating more jobs in the next 10 years.
So you might have seen in the West Australian yesterday, 2,000 head due to go out this weekend. Yeah. Whether you're talking, and I'm just going to answer a different question than you're asking.
Really?
Because
good on you.
whether you're talking beef or whether you're talking lithium, it's all got to go through the port. And the port and the town have been at odds for way too long, and that seriously needs to change. I mean, the port supports 5,000 jobs in Hedland, 18.3 billion in economic contribution, 1 in 20 jobs in WA, 2.2 billion in taxes and royalties, and we haven't even mentioned the GST. For every dollar spent in the port, it's a $1.40 spent in the town. So if we start talking not 1 million tonnes, but 1 billion tonnes through the port, whether it's cattle or lithium or iron ore, that's another 2,700 jobs. That's where the focus needs to be.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And the town, in a sense, needs to get out of the way. We've got to stop titillating ourselves with the dust issue, get the buffers in place, compensate where compensation is needed, and move on.
And did you want to talk about the beef market?
No.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Also, it's going so well. So our next question is to you, Tony, from the Pilbara Regional Council. So there's a lot of conversation and a lot of discussions about the diversification of industries and different industry sectors in the Pilbara. So you were talking about solar, geothermal, waste to energy, and I'd really like, a bit more detail on this, on where that is going in the next 10 years, and what does it look like? Expand on it for us lay people that don't completely understand it.
Thanks, Kitty. You're back on the program. I was sure I was going to get the beef question after that.
You may still.
I'm fascinated and intrigued at the size of the opportunity that's in the region in the energy space. Not just gas, but around geothermal, around solar, around waste to energy, around a whole range of different initiatives where all of the right ingredients are there. In an era of demand that's going to continue to rise as other nations around the Indian Ocean Rim and our near vicinity start to mature and have increasing demands for energy as well. So exporting power across a pipe to Indonesia, I think, is potentially just the start of bigger things. With a lithium industry well and truly in its early stages now, do we see a time in the not too distant future where we're creating battery ships that are carting power around the world? That there's a whole wealth of exciting opportunity sitting there in front of us. I don't know what that future looks like just at the moment, but I'm conscious that the Pilbara has so many of those necessary ingredients to have a head start at making a go of it.
And Tony, what needs to happen now to sort of take advantage of that head start? You've got all those ingredients. What are the actions that need to happen now? We heard some good conversations from the Minister. What needs to happen now to make sure that is realised, do you think?
A big part of it is, as a region, being receptive to new investment approaches.
Yeah.
So where we're having knocks on the door from international companies like Sahara projects, being receptive to them, facilitating that investment wherever we can, making their necessary inputs available, whether it be land, whether it be being able to accommodate workforces, access to ports and the like, making sure that as a region we're willing to cooperate with the private sector and enable them to do what they do best, which is generating money. Because while they're generating money as a region, we're benefiting from that in the form of jobs, growth, diversification, and all of the other things that come with community building initiatives.
You're right, Tony, and it's got like the example of collaboration that today's event is, just like the Pilbara Regional Council and all of the gentlemen here today, it's got to be about everyone working together and maximising the advantages and the opportunities, and it's got to be industry, private sector, government, all three tiers, everyone working together, or things just don't work. And Pilbara Cities is a great example of that, of how it has worked. Thanks very much for that, Tony. So I'd now like to ask a question to you, Alan, from the Shire of East Pilbara. So I did just want a bit more information. It is interesting that you've talked about small to medium local businesses as well. I think that's across the whole Pilbara, but also talking about social services as a job creator in the next 10 years as a sector, and just expanding on this a bit more for us, and where you see what in particular you see in the social services.
Well, thanks, Kitty. But as we see our communities age and grow, we need to support that age and growth. A lot of people at the moment see the Pilbara as a short-term, medium life generator, and when you get older, you move away. However, we have a significant portion of the population that have been there a lot longer than 20 years, 40 years or 60 years. They've been born there. They've been there for couples of generations. But taking them away from the country they were born does not facilitate their health.
No.
So we need to put centres within the region where people can stay and get their support, whether it be home and community care, independent support services, good health services as we see campuses growing up and getting bigger. But we need to make sure that the people who want to remain in our cities can stay there and have a good quality life for a long period of time. And we talk about the cost of energy. Just providing air conditioning in the summer makes a lot of difference to a lot of older people.
Yep.
And
younger people, all people in the
all
Pilbara,
age groups, whether you've got a 6-month-old baby or an 80-year-old resident, you need to keep them cool. Yes, we get bloody cold in winter, but we get frigging hot in summer at times. So we've got to be able to balance that out so you get a good quality life whole year round. But we've got to remember that people eventually do want to stay in the Pilbara. They want to enjoy the lifestyle, whether it's out in a boat up in, catching big fish in Karratha with Chris, or Dale taking them out to Onslow, or David, wandering around catching mud crabs, or just coming out in the desert in the winter time. We have a great lifestyle, but it's not just all about work. We've got to maintain the populations we have and continue to grow. We want to see 3rd, 4th, 5th generations across the whole wide range, not just one sector. But we've got to support that longevity.
I think also, Alan, with the incredible upgrades to the sort of lifestyle amenities and just all of the Pilbara towns and cities, people are, choosing to stay longer, and that is their lifelong destination. And I think there's a challenge in all regional towns and cities all across WA, is we want to stop the people leaving that weren't going to leave anyway, that feel like they were forced to leave. And what I mean by that, you're always going to get people that sort of move around. They might live 5 years here, 5 years there, and they were never going to stay long term. But we want to stop people leaving that feel they have no other choice than to leave, and generally it's because of either health services or education. So improving those social services and facilities, I think, is a priority for all Pilbara centres. And with all the work that's been done in the Pilbara, people are staying a lot longer. And staying there for life, which is awesome.
Yeah, I certainly agree. We had the opening of the square a couple of weeks ago, and one of the guys there had been in the Pilbara for 45 years. He was there when Newman was a tent town. But, there's other people around who lived in Marble Bar and Nullagine, been there for 80 years. So it's great to see people want to be in the Pilbara and want to stay in the Pilbara.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that, Alan. I also have a final question on this topic to you, Dale, and talking about tourism and Indigenous cultural tourism. There just seems to be so many opportunities that we're really only looking at the tip of the iceberg at the moment, and this is the area we can really expand. It's got huge potential. What needs to happen here? What's already happening, and how can sort of everyone in the Pilbara support this?
Well, I think, as Minister McTiernan said earlier on, 40 to 50,000 years of history in the Pilbara is
very
just
special.
Amazing. To see that landscape and participate and enrich it via the cultural Indigenous tourism in particular really is a huge opportunity. Is it going to produce the most jobs over the next 10 years? Probably not. I think all of us in the room would love to say that it will.
Yeah.
We're all passionate about trying to do the best we can to make it happen.
Yep.
How do we do that? I think it is about collaboration, facilitation. Providing those opportunities to work with those Indigenous corporations to actually sort of realise their opportunity and invest in those communities, invest in those in corporations, and make sure that we actually work together.
I think it definitely is about investment in those organisations and corporations, and maybe we look at getting cheaper airfares or regional airfares to get people to the Pilbara in the first place. Thanks for the support. There's just such a big opportunity in that space, and it really feels like it's untapped, and we're really lucky what we have in the Pilbara. It's unique. Thank you so much for that, Dale. So now I'd like to move on to our second question for the day, which is which current developments projects within the Pilbara most excite you? And as before, you've all given us your answers, and David, feel free to just talk about whatever you want when we get to you, no problems. But if I can talk to you first, Chris, about Balla, which everyone has talked about or mentioned nearly amongst the group. Just maybe a bit of an update and the impact that this is going to have. It is a big
in terms of scale, it's a big project for today, but in terms of overall scale, it pales into insignificance compared to Chevron and Woodside and some of those things. But I like the project for a couple of reasons. One, the opportunity to open up that central Pilbara resource, and there's a whole bunch of stranded assets in the central Pilbara which just can't be developed at the moment because you've got the rail lines going to Port Hedland, the rail lines going to Dampier, and a new corridor down the middle that opens up all that stranded asset is really exciting.
Can you just explain that stranded assets? So assets that just aren't being utilised are
Well,
just there.
there's no infrastructure nearby.
Supporting them.
So there's
Yeah.
no rail infrastructure to actually simply get that ore, which is good quality ore, to port. It could be done in the future, but this actually frees up all that. The other part that is really exciting is the opportunity to change the employment paradigm that's being explored with Balla Infrastructure, Flinders Resources and the various players around setting up the Pilbara as a source community for employment, for a drive-in, drive-out workforce, or a bus-in, bus-out workforce, to complement fly-in, fly-out when is absolutely necessary. So the concept of, rather than having to fly everyone to the Pilbara to do that work, to actually have them in the Pilbara, living in the Pilbara, working in the Pilbara, because we can do it now. It's actually cheaper to do it, to have people living in the Pilbara than having them fly in, fly out. Acknowledging that from time to time, people have to do that for short periods, but the fact that we're actually exploring this opportunity, there seems to be a genuine commitment to do it, and everyone, all levels of government, all seem to be working hard to make this happen. We haven't done it yet, but it's an exciting project to be working closely on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris.
Can I
Yes.
just...
Of course you can.
But can I comment on
Yes,
that,
Alan.
Kitty? It was interesting to see in Queensland they moved some legislation on Friday to say that any FIFO mine within 125 kilometres of a town of 200 people can't be 100% FIFO.
Yeah.
And that's the backing of the government. So whilst we talk about local jobs for local content and all those, maybe the government needs to start talking more. I know the companies talk about it, but you've got to go down the line of somewhere enforcing it. And they also change the Discrimination Act to, all you want at times is for the companies to advertise residential or to be part of the process, not just fully FIFO.
Yep, I agree. And I think a lot of people in the room would as well. Thanks so much for that, Alan. David, I was going to ask you about super high-speed internet and smart city hub development.
That's good.
Yeah, happy to talk about that?
May I answer it?
So really, what I wanted to, the question was which current development projects within the Pilbara most excite you? And you talked about super high-speed internet and smart city hub development. And look, there's some really exciting things happening in Port Hedland with the new centre. And I know that access to broadband and internet speeds is the #1 issue across all of regional WA. So maybe talking a bit about this opportunity that you see.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got NBN being rolled out, we've got Next Gen, but it needs to be more than that. We need to be talking about 1 gig high speed, the benefits of be talking about true diversification. We've got to enable that to happen, and whether it's the town stepping in to assist that, whether we're talking to Google or Amazon and getting that sort of roll out, that's the direction we need to be going, missing out the intermediate step and going for something substantial.
And do you see that? Do you see that as being that could happen?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe explaining a bit more about the incubator centre and what's happening in Port Hedland with that. That's all going ahead?
Yep, that's all going ahead, and of course there's the opportunities for small business to participate and get off the ground. But in order for those small businesses, whether it's the home businesses we've got, your partners employed in the resource sector, the other ones sitting at home, highly qualified with all that experience, can't tap in as they should be able to into the market. That high-speed internet, and through those sort of facilities, it really provides that opportunity.
And we know, David, that there's 218,000 small businesses in Western Australia, and we know that home-based and micro businesses is the largest growth within the small business sector. So, and people want to have home-based businesses. That's really where we're heading. And so if we've got that internet access and the high speed, that's how we're going to be able to facilitate
Absolutely.
it.
I think it's critical, especially for regional centres.
Sure is. Thanks, David. Tony, I did want to ask you again, and we have already talked about tourism, but we're talking about the UNESCO listing for the Burrup and just what impact that's going to have. I think, we know how important tourism is, but this listing, how does that change things?
Well, perhaps if I can speak from some personal experience.
Yes.
I've just been fortunate enough to spend a period of time wandering around Europe, and as part of that family holiday, we found pretty quickly that if you were touring the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, then it was a consistently good, a consistently worthwhile an engaging experience. It was something worth travelling to see. UNESCO recognition of the Burrup, I think, sends that same signal to that international community of travellers that this is something that's worth making an extended journey to come and view, particularly if we can get a chain of those sites up and down the coast. Once you get a group of them together, then that adds even more incentive to travel to the region. I think it also sends some signals about the recognition of this as an Aboriginal site and its contribution to the global community as this place of historical significance that again is worthy as a cultural excursion. If you're visiting Western Australia, it's one more reason to consider travelling to the north rather than just focusing on Perth and the southwest, along with all of the opportunities that it offers for Aboriginal businesses surrounding that particular site as well, of course.
Yeah, it's incredible opportunities, and it really is on a global scale a unique and unbelievable sort of opportunity for visitors and tourists to come and look at, and something that is globally loved. So we really need to take advantage of it and raise that profile.
It's largely unknown at this point in time overseas. Karratha has some brand recognition overseas, but a UNESCO listing will elevate it into that same stage.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much for that, Tony. Alan, we're talking about the completion of the Newman Town Centre, which is I've seen lots of footage of that and it just looks amazing, and I've heard fantastic reports so far. So that's including a small business incubator, The Edge at the Square. An update on that and where that's going at the moment.
Already in a short period of time, we've seen a number of those home businesses, which David talked about, are moving into the square, and you get passing trade, you get people coming and going. It's just giving them an opportunity. We have a commercial kitchen there. Take the lady who sells the sourdough bread. From home she does about 6 loaves. She's managed to do 60 loaves at $12 each in a morning. So it's already getting that incubation going. And there's other people who just want to, now that it's there, will use it, and just bringing people into the town centre. It's just not the town centre and the Edge itself, but people who come into there also see the other businesses that now exist. We've got a new shopping centre coming, Sports Power's open, IGA, got the Boulevard Shopping Centre, KG Tyre expanding. There's just people then come back to the town centre rather than shopping online. It's a place to be, to meet people, to have a coffee. It's just a generation of interest into the small businesses around the town centre. Yeah,
it just changes everything, doesn't it?
Changes the dynamics. Game changer. Yeah, bringing people back.
Yep. Exactly. And when a visitor comes to any regional town or city and they walk around and they see people sitting having a coffee and there's life and conversation and noise, that's what makes you want to stay a bit longer.
That's right.
Think of your own travel experiences wherever you go.
And no doubt, some of our towns do have social issues, but the more people we bring into a town centre, it forces some of those social issues out by just the activation of the town centres.
Exactly. And also you're supporting and growing more small businesses and creating more jobs, which also assists with
that's what
issues.
I ultimately hope. As I talked about the transient nature of people, the people who take over the small home-based businesses usually think they're not going to be in town for a while. But if we get them to stay longer, they might go from having, the one-stop shop on a Wednesday making bread to becoming the local baker over a longer period of time. So just giving them the sense of longevity again, I use that word, that we want people to stay.
And I think, Alan, I know that in regional communities, a lot of the business leaders or the leaders of the community of tomorrow start from a small business. That's where they come from, a small business background. So they come into a community in a small business, maybe a home-based business, and they start getting involved. And we know that's where a lot of the leaders come from, because that's also an issue, is looking at who are our future leaders going to be and how do we broaden the pool of potential leaders, because every regional town, city, community needs good leaders.
Not even small business. I think the coding activities they're doing at the library at the moment for kids, 4 to 8, and you see what they're doing, and you think of what, we want gigabyte connections. These are the kids, leaders of the future. Just sit at home doing coding, doing apps, artificial intelligence. Why do we have to go elsewhere in the world? Why can't we do it from the Pilbara? As long as we have the connectivity. I think we've got great opportunities, not just the small business people, but the kids coming through.
Yep, exactly, supporting the whole community. Thanks so much for that, Alan. Dale, I just wanted to ask you a question about the Onslow Marine Supply Base, which is a project that's been in the pipeline and worked on for many years, and it really is getting to an exciting stage. So maybe a bit more information on that, and because it is exciting, and where you see it going.
Absolutely, it's actually a magnificent opportunity for Onslow as a town site to broaden its base beyond the gas hubs of Wheatstone and Macedon. But they're in the final stages of getting financial investment decision. I think seeking some funding from the Feds in relation to the capital dredge. I think it's around $110 million of investment for the project, and a great opportunity. There's about 35 direct jobs associated with logistics for the industry, but there's another 200 or so jobs indirectly associated. So for not just Onslow, but the broader community servicing the gas fields, they've done the numbers and looking at opportunities, as far out past Barrow, a good 100 k's beyond Onslow in an arc. So the opportunities present for Onslow, but also for the region, but also in relation to the port of Ashburton and also Anzia, the strategic industrial area. So there's 8,000 hectares of land available for industry. That's a lot of land. That's a lot of job opportunities.
Yeah.
So that's extremely exciting, and all coming from a variety of sources and opportunities over the next 5-10 years.
Yeah. And I think the transformation in Onslow has been incredible, and it's been project driven, but what we're seeing is lasting community infrastructure that's been built as well. So you have things like the marine supply base, but we're seeing things like the amazing, community garden and the community centres and all that sort of facilities that weren't there before. That's building a sense of place, a real sense of place in Onslow.
For those that haven't been to Onslow for a number of years, I mean, the past 5 years,
Amazing.
$50 million of airport, $40 million of new hospital, and a few months away from completion, a brand new emergency services facility, brand new administration centre. The businesses that are springing out of those is fantastic.
Yeah, it is incredible. Well, gentlemen, that sort of brings us to the close of this session. Thank you so much for contributing and for your time, and having the local government authorities here today and everyone talking about how we work together is so important. So please put your hands together for Chris Adams, David Pentz, Tony Friday, Alan Cooper and Dale Stewart. Thank you very much.